Chess friends, I hope you are doing well. Today, I am very excited to share a thrilling chess game that was played between KillerFish and me. KillerFish played his killer Gambit against me and sacrificed his knight and rook in the opening. I will share the chess tactics and strategies that he employed in the game. By the way, with the black pieces, it is very insane for me to defeat any top chess engine, and don't complain about why I lost the game with the black pieces. Just enjoy the game, sit back, and eat popcorn. So, KillerFish started the game with d4, and we have d5, here. Instead of playing c4, KillerFish goes for a London. He played the London system because he was afraid of me, and rather than consider any natural kind of move, I decided to go with g6 so that my bishop can deploy on the g7 square to attack the center. Here, KillerFish shows his incredible strategy by playing h4. This h4 move is very crucial as he can attack me immediately with h5 and try to open up the rook file. Therefore, I played h5 myself, stopping the pawn advancement and also occupying the light squares, where bishop to h6 can arrive to attack the bishop, and that's my plan because KillerFish is nothing. I am the stock of many branches of fishes. I am the deep fish of the ocean. We have bishop to h6, and bishop exchanges happen on the board. You can see that my knight is dominating over the light square, where the light square bishop is also swimming in the pool. Another approach that I can play is b6 to put my bishop on the b7 square to gain access to this diagonal, and here we have e4 on the board, attacking the pawn. I decided to capture the pawn on e4 and after knight takes e4, the game goes on. Another alternative move in this position would be to consider c6. The c6 move is also good because it stabilizes the center. I am showing you the alternative variation, and then KillerFish would consider going to d2, aiming for a long castle. The bishop would go to the e6 square to emphasize the protection of the pawn. After the castle, a knight here, and center exchanges occur. I would capture the pawn with my c6 pawn, because the rook can go to c8 to get access to this file. Therefore, after rook to e1 happens on the board to access this file, black's best move would be to consider going to b6. This move is very strong and stable. But if black dares to play any natural kind of move like an inferior chess player, including you, for example, knight to b6, then he will be just gone. Because now KillerFish can kill your bishop by sacrificing his own rook by capturing the piece on the e6 square. What a beautiful and brilliant sacrifice it is. Because after you capture KillerFish's rook, the pawns will be just harassed and weakened. The king's position will also be weakened. Therefore, after bishop to b5 happens, forcing the king to move, knight to a3 will arrive to access the dark square, where it will attack these weak pawns. Now you have to consider moving the knight back to the f7 square to protect these squares, so that after knight to e2, the king goes here, giving some free space for the rook. I will go with my hot move, knight to f4, directly attacking and invading the king's position, and you can see that the e6 pawn will be just under pressure. Black's good move would be to consider going to c8, but that doesn't matter because white can emphasize more attacking pressure with rook to e1, putting more pressure on the e6 pawn. Now, 200 rated chess players might think of considering knight to d8 to protect that pawn, but hold on, white will play a strong and powerful bold move, and that move is knight takes g6, and look, fool, that is the difference between the top chess engine and you. You are trying to protect your e6 pawn and the top chess engine sacrifices its whole knight in front of the king, and that is the reason why you are there and we are here in the computer chess tables, because if black dares to capture the knight on the g6 square, then knight to e5 follows, checking the black king. After the king moves here, queen to g5 will arrive, and in a few moves, rook to e3 will follow with the idea of playing rook to f3, leading to a checkmate in a few moves. The game will be just over for you, right? Because there is nothing that you can do, the black king will be just harassed. So, going back to the position, we discovered that any natural kind of move such as c6 would be a very bad choice. That is the reason why I decided to capture the pawn on e4, because I am the world champion Stockfish. Nobody can easily defeat me. Here, the light square bishop has these good outposts, but KillerFish decided to play knight to f5, this knight comes to the f5 square for center dominance over the d4 square, and this knight also gets activated. Now we have c3. Protecting the pawn and also opening up the queen's diagonal, where bishop to d3 can also be possible. We have b6, where bishop to b7 can arrive to gain access to this diagonal. Bishop d3, bishop b7 follows in the game, indirectly pressuring the pawn and the rook. Now, the knight moves here, and I played knight to d7, where I can open up and strike the center with c5 or e5, and that's my plan. Where I can move up my queen and go for a long castle trip, because I need a vacation for my long-term journey in the future. Now the queen comes here, and we have e6 on the board, where queen to e7 is possible to prepare for a long castle and a beach trip. By playing e6, I created some weaknesses on the dark squares that I have. Therefore, KillerFish gets the chance to play his killer gambit by playing knight to e5, and this is the killer chess opening that you can use in your game. The problem for black is that he cannot capture, I cannot capture, the knight on the e5 square. If I dare to do that, my position will be just harassed, because after d takes e5, you can see that this f6 square will be occupied by the knight. I cannot play queen to e7 because there is knight to f6 check. My king will be forced to move and unable to castle there. I have two alternative moves where the king can go here or there. Many players might consider a short side castle, which looks so passionate and like a good choice, but hold on, here white will play a crazy move, long castle, indirectly attacking the queen. Now, your queen has to move because it has no other choice. KillerFish will immediately strike by playing g4 on the board, and you can see that your knight and the pawn will both be under attack. Here, h5 could also be possible to attack on the king side, opening up the rook's file simultaneously, with the powerful attacking pressure of the bishop's diagonal. KillerFish's pieces will dominate the king side, and black will just be harassed. Therefore, after pawn captures on g4, queen takes g4 will arrive on the board. KillerFish's tactic would be to consider h5 to attack the pawn. Black will need to consider king to g7 to gain access to the h-file. However, h5 will arrive without effort. After rook here, rook to g1 will arrive to gain access to the g-file. Black's position becomes increasingly frustrated. The knight has to move back to h6 to attack the queen. After the queen moves, black might think of considering rook to d8 to attack the bishop on the d3 square, but that does not matter, because KillerFish's powerful coordination of pieces will continuously pressurize black's position. Because now KillerFish can capture the pawn on g6, and after the exchanges, KillerFish will play a brilliant move. Can you guess what that move is? Think about liberty and say a rook sacrifice on the g6 square. KillerFish sacrifices the rook like a champion because, after the capture, rook to g1 check will arrive, the black king will be just harassed, and after the king hides in the dustbin, knight to f6 will arrive, checking the black king, and his position will be completely disrupted and over. The game will be just over. So, going back to the position, we discovered that black cannot afford to capture the knight on the e5 square. That's the reason why I decided to move my king to the f8 square. That's a good move that I decided to play here. But here, KillerFish has thrown a fishing rod into the river and played a brilliant move. Can you guess what the brilliant move is? The move is knight takes f7. What a brilliant move it is. It sacrifices the knight right on the board because it forces my king to capture the knight on the f7 square. Then you can see that, by sacrificing the knight, KillerFish weakened my two central and kingside pawns, and then he played knight to g5 check. The king just faces many troubles and malaria problems here. The king cannot go to g7 because there is knight takes e6, which will fork the pieces, no matter where the king goes. Let's say the king goes to g8 as it happens on the board. Then queen takes check will arrive. After the king goes here, queen f7 will arrive, then, bishop takes f5 will arrive with the idea of attacking the g6 pawn. Now, you have to capture the bishop, and after long castle, rook to e1 followed by rook to e6 will arrive to checkmate my black king. The rook is only one move away from checkmating, and you cannot leave your knight because your knight will be under attack. Therefore, after the queen goes to the e8 square, attacking the queen, queen takes f5 will arrive with the idea of pressuring the knight, and the knight is just a dumb knight. he cannot do anything, he is just jobless there. Many players might think of considering rook to f8, but there is queen to h7, which will lead to checkmate. Therefore, after the knight moves here, rook e1 followed by queen g6 tries to protect the king side and protect the e6 square also from the knight. Queen to f4 will arrive, and you can see that the black king just faces millions of problems because the rook, knight and queen combined are frustrating the kingside position. The king will be just paralyzed because KillerFish brilliantly played the gambit and paralyzed the whole board, and that's a bad thing for me. So, let me share a quote about life. Life is short, break the rules, forgive quickly, kiss slowly, love truly, laugh uncontrollably and never regret anything that makes you smile. So, going back to the reason, we discovered that playing any natural kind of move, such as king to g8, would be a very bad choice. That's why I had to play king to e8, I had no other choice, and the pawn is also under attack, but the problem for KillerFish is that he cannot capture the pawn on e6 because there is queen to e7, which will pin down the queen to the king. That's why KillerFish first captured the knight on f5, forcing me to capture, and still he cannot capture the pawn. He first played long castle, and now he is threatening to capture the pawn on the e6 square. Many players here might think of considering rook to h6 to protect the pawn, because they might think that it is a good move, but there is knight takes e6, if one door closes, another opens, as I always say. After queen to e7 happened on the board, here I will play knight to g7, which will check you with my knight and queen. The king cannot go through these routes because there is queen takes queen, which KillerFish will play, then he will kill that pawn, and then he will kill my rook, and that is not what I want in the game. So, going back to the reason, we discovered that playing natural moves such as rook to h6 would be a very bad choice. That's the reason why we have queen to e7 on the board to protect the pawn. Still, we have knight takes e7 because it seizes control over the king's position, and the king cannot escape through the route. Many players here might think of considering knight to f6 because it looks like such a good move, but hold on, you don't rush to capture the pawn on c7. You can always increase the pressure with your pieces and play queen to e5, and that's what KillerFish played in the game, attacking the pawn and the rook indirectly on the board. Many players might think of considering rook to h6 because they have average brains with an IQ of 69, and you can see that KillerFish's knight can go to these squares and then attack my queen, and my position will be just over. So, going back to the reason, we discovered that playing any natural kind of move is not possible. That's why I needed to escape my king first and make sure my king is very safe with king to f7. KillerFish here played knight to g5 check, and after the king moves here, the queen is unattacked. But when you have advantages, ignore all the queen exchange offers. Don't do that. You can increase the pressure with queen to b5, and that's what white played in the game. Where rook to e1 is also possible because the knight is joining the attack on the kingside position, right? There we have bishop to e4 protecting the pawn. Now we have rook to e1 pinning down the bishop where f3 becomes a threat. f3 is a valuable threat. After the queen moves here, you can see that KillerFish played his final and bold tactic in this version. Can you guess what the move is? Of course, the move is Levi Rosman's rook sacrifice. He sacrificed the rook on the e4 square because, after the capture, there is queen to f5 check, and you can see that the black king just faces millions of troubles. He cannot go to the e-file at all because there is queen takes e4, which will check the black king and the rooks simultaneously on the board. At this point, even the king cannot go to g8 or g7. If the king goes to g8, there is queen to f7 checkmate, and if the king goes to g7, there is knight to e6 check followed by queen to g6, and that will lead to a checkmate. The position will be just over for you, right? So, going back to the reason, we discovered that the king cannot go to these squares as it appears to be an unnatural kind of move. Therefore, I decided to play queen to f6. That's the only move I played here. Many players, including inferior ones, might think of considering knight to f6 to block the check, but that's a very rash move. I mean, that's an idiotic move because there is knight takes e4 attacking the queen and knight simultaneously on the board, right? Therefore, in this position, I decided to play queen to f6, and that's the only move I had to play, sacrificing my own knight. The king faces problems because he has no bodyguard pawns, therefore, the rook goes to the e8 square, trying to secure his position, my position. We have knight to h7 check, and in the final analysis, we are left with almost equal material, but the problem for me is that I have no king security. It is just over because KillerFish's gambit is just killer and amazing. He amazingly creates the endgame where he makes so many threats to my black king's position, right? I want to hide the king, but KillerFish is just giving some sort of repetitive checks on the board. Now, a few moves later, KillerFish is trying to catch my king and rook simultaneously on the board, and he finally played queen to a8 on the board. In a few moves, he even played rook to f8 to catch my kingfish on the board. We have e3 check, and after the king moves here, many players might think of considering e2 on the board to promote into a new queen, but hold on, if you dare to do that, your game will be just over because there is queen to c8 check. After the king moves here, rook to d8 will arrive, and you can see that the black king will be just harassed, leading to a checkmate. So, going back to the original, we discovered that e2 would be a very bad choice. After the king moves to the d6 square, a few moves later, you can see that KillerFish played rook to g8, a few moves later, he caught my rook on the d7 square, and I had no other choice here. We had a capture and another capture, and at the end of the day, he had an extra rook, he had one rook, and I had nothing. By promoting into a new queen, he just checkmated me, and don't think I am a loser. I will take revenge on KillerFish. If he defeated me one time, I can defeat him thousands of times. So, I hope you enjoyed the game very much. If so, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Bye bye, take care and see you soon.